Welcome to a new episode of These Go to 11. Let's turn it up. Hey everybody, welcome back to These Go to 11, an unchurchy conversation about everyday faith. Please make sure you like, subscribe, and review on your favorite podcast platform. This not only helps us to get our content out there, but also helps us to find out what you, our faithful listeners, think. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to These Go to 11. Once again, I'm Nathan Bell. Joining me as always, Greg Dutcher. Greg, you're going to stay on your side of the table, and I'm going to stay on mine.
Yes, sir. We've got a glass panel here between us, don't we?
That's right. We've drawn some boundaries with one another.
Yes.
Oh, that's not the kind of boundaries we're talking about today,
that's not it? Shoot, dude, because I needed more space than you. I think I have it. My side of the room.
I was going to say, I'm kind of backed up here.
You don't have a whole lot of space, dude. So I'm fine with those boundaries.
That's right.
I'm fine with those, dude. Yeah, that's the theme that will occupy our attention today.
Yeah.
The famous boundaries discussion.
Yeah, we are continuing what our church did back in April, this series on Peacemakers, and we are continuing that discussion. And so we talked about just an introduction, and then we talked about forgiveness and what that looked like. And today we were talking about boundaries because that has been a prevalent question that has come up. What boundaries do we draw with certain people? How
Absolutely.
do we draw boundaries with people?
Yeah.
Or do we just say, here I am, walk all over me? So looking forward to talking about this one and seeing what we have. We want to remind everyone that we will be doing a Q&A for our last one next week. So please make sure that you get those questions in to us. We've already been getting lots of questions in, but make sure you get more in. You can email those to Greg and myself at thesegoto1115@gmail.com. Thesegoto11 is all spelled out, and then the number 15@gmail.com. Or you can actually go to our website, christfc.org. And Greg, tell us how they can go ahead and get questions to us from christfc.org.
Yeah, if you go right to the website, there's a form. Also in the building, we had it out earlier on at the beginning of the month. If you're in the building, of course, I don't know if you will be in time to get these to us. There's a QR code that you can scan. But just go to the website, and you will see the page for These Go to 11, and there's a little form you click. I looked at it the other night. It says name, but it's optional. Mm-hmm. So I recognize some people might have a very personal thing, that rather than saying, hey, this is John Smith, and I'm asking for a friend. If your wife hates you and says such and such, they could be a little uncomfortable. So the question obviously is required because there's no point in filling out the form. But we'll get those, and I actually have a few that have come in via email, just from the series itself.
Yeah.
And some conversation. So I almost feel like we could get rolling on that now.
Yeah. Just
with those few questions. One of those that I got, I think I alluded to this the first week in this podcast series at the beginning of May. It dovetails nicely with our boundaries discussion. I would bet, dude, whether or not people even use the term boundaries, 80% or more, just a guess, of questions people usually ask in this area of conflict and conflict resolution, if it's possible, tends to touch on this issue, whether the term is used or not.
Yeah.
Because usually when somebody's saying, yeah, but what about when, fill in the exceptional circumstances, they tend to be boundary oriented. And shouldn't you draw one, or shouldn't there be a healthy boundary? Is it even wise to do this in light of X, Y, and Z?
Yeah.
So I would suspect this podcast, I hope, will serve well as a setup.
Yeah.
I'll use volleyball imagery, dude. The set for the spike of next week.
Nice.
And we'll have a special guest joining us.
Yeah.
Ryan Gosling from The Fall Guy. Were you able to book him, dude?
I got somebody a little lower.
A little lower than him.
A little lower.
All right, just a little bit.
Just a little bit.
Yeah. Can you imagine, dude, if we were really chill one day and we just said, yeah, joining us today is Hollywood actor Ryan Gosling, or we got Steven Spielberg joining us to talk movies and that sort of thing. I'd love to be able to just drop that one time, dude, with just the most low-key. If we had Spielberg on here, dude, we'd probably not even be able to talk.
We'd promote the crap out of that thing, and we'd just be like, so movies.
Movies.
Yeah.
Talk. Dude, I'd be like Chris Farley in the old SNL. Do you remember in E.T.? When like he makes the bike go and it silhouettes the moon? Yes. That was awesome. Yeah, we probably shouldn't interview somebody of note.
Right.
Because we'll ruin it right out of the gate. Hopefully we won't ruin this topic, though, dude, tonight.
And I don't think we will ruin it when our other guest comes on.
No, I don't think so either. Something tells me the guest is going to be like, dude, put on an old, comfortable pair of slippers.
That's right.
So we'll just...
we'll walk all over him.
Well, that's what you asked tonight. Can we walk all over people or be walked on? So that's what we're going to talk about.
That's right. Well, and let's dive right in because let's talk about that term for a second, boundaries, right?
Boundaries.
It almost feels a little pop psychology,
it does.
Doesn't it?
It does.
So what do we do with that? I mean, do we really want to be moving into terminology that is pop psychology?
Yeah, good question, dude. I think here's my political answer. I should run for office. It depends. If we uncritically adopt a term, you have to be careful because when you do so it's a popular term, so it's got to be true, and we don't really examine it. It can carry with it some baggage. If we mean boundaries in a common sense way, which is what I think we'll try to define here tonight, I think it's perfectly fine. We talked about this a little bit in our intro episode, if memory serves. I'll be personal, dude. Years ago, I heard people talking about Henry Cloud's book, Boundaries. That was like an early trendy book for me. My goodness, in the 80s, the books were, MacArthur had the Lordship Controversy, The Gospel According to Jesus. In the 90s, I think you're getting into like purpose-driven church, purpose-driven life, Prayer of Jabez, late 90s, maybe early 2000. There were a lot of these books. You could put the Left Behind books in there, right? And I know it's fictional, but there's always been these movements. Boundaries was kind of, I want to say, 90s-esque, maybe even 80s. And I, at that time, had a real suspicion of it. And then I will say this. I don't know much about Henry Cloud, the author. I've heard him speak now 3 times in person. Never really sought him out. He was just another speaker at a conference where, no disrespect to Henry Cloud, but honestly, I went to probably hear somebody else.
Sure.
And he happened to be there. And in every case, I always found myself walking away, I'd like to sit down, just, have a meal with this guy and pick his brain because it was good. His book Boundaries, I have a tweak here and there with it, but for the most part, dude, I think it's a pretty strong, healthy book. And he starts with something that I think is a helpful distinction, moving towards definition. He said, boundaries are not meant to be excuses for, to your point, dude, kind of the pop psychology, sort of a, God wants me to be happy, which is one of the most absurd statements ever. It's amazing how popular that is, that God's whole goal is to make me warm and happy. And I mean, ultimately, God's going to bring us into perfect glory. So in the eternal ultimate sense, yes. But to read Scripture and come away with that here, when Jesus said, in this world you will have trouble, and take heart, I've overcome it. He's preparing us for adversity. So I was very curious what Henry Cloud was going to say about boundaries, because I had already heard some people use them for things that seemed a little convenient. I want to relax. I need some boundaries in my life. You know what I mean? It seems
Yeah.
like it'd be very easy.
Yeah.
Where all of a sudden boundaries are going to get me in a Barca Lounger with a Mai Tai with an umbrella in it.
Right.
And just relaxing, right? And being left alone for all time and space. That's not at all what he argues. He kind of makes a razor's edge distinction using two prepositions. He says the scriptures tell us that we are responsible. We bear responsibility towards one another. And he said, so he sort of anticipates the objection, says if anybody thinks that this idea of boundaries is to just justify self-indulgent behavior, it isn't. And he says the Bible is replete with example, all the one another's. Bear, love, support, pray for, forgive. But he says a healthy understanding of those things is that we are responsible to, not responsible for. And dude, I don't know why, that just resonates with me.
Yeah.
That razor's edge distinction between those two prepositions, don't you just feel it?
Yeah.
When you're responsible for, to me, an illustration of that is when you co-sign a loan that you probably shouldn't be co-signing.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not going to carte blanche say it's wrong in all cases.
Sure.
There may be a parent-child relationship where it just, for whatever reason, whatever the special circumstances are, it makes sense. But in general, I think most people would say co-signing a loan is being responsible for someone.
Yeah.
More than it is being responsible to someone.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. Just quick announcement. Something's funky going on with my mic. So if you hear some popping, that's all that's going on. We'll get through. It's not horrible, but it's interesting because one of the things that I think we're going to end up getting more into, and I want to explore more, is the boundaries that we put on other people, right? Yeah. I think more and more the boundaries we place in work it's becoming a healthier thing, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I think America 2024, we do just put too much emphasis on work.
Yep.
So I think there are times where it's like, nope, I'm done.
Yeah.
I laid those boundaries out at every time I am at a new job or I go to a new school. I just lay it out. It's like, look, I don't typically check my stuff on the weekend. I don't check emails. Like, I don't check it at night.
Yep.
You know, I'm typically on top of it from this time to this time. If there's an exception, we can discuss that. Hey, something big's going on and I need you to be on in order to check through some things. No problem,
Yep.
right? You know, hey, can you make sure you're up a little earlier than normal because we might have weather coming through and you need to send the email out for the cancellation or the delay or whatever it might be. Yeah, sure, no problem. So I think in that regard, things are getting better to a certain respect. I think we need to be careful because, just like with liberty and license, we can swing one way too far or the other. I think it could easily swing to the other way where we take advantage of, employers and things like that. But I think in general, that's good. I think what we're going to talk about today, though, is what are the boundaries that we place on one another?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, particularly, dude, when we're trying to resolve conflict.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, I'll just put it out there. There's a difference between resolving conflict with someone where there's been drift, tension.
Yeah.
What if somebody is actively trying to harm you?
Yeah.
Or harm your family? If there's like a classic stalker situation.
Sure.
I think those were some of the things, come up and you start thinking, well, wait a minute. How do I apply Jesus' word of how many times do I forgive? Well, 7 times 7. Does that apply in this situation? Does that apply here? What do you do when you have a family member that has such episodic and over the top melodramatic moments, throughout life that are very harmful to families, children, impressional people, vulnerable people. I think I mentioned that. I talked to somebody recently who said they've got an extended family member. I don't know. I've never met them. It may be a mental illness issue. It might not be, but it sounds like it could be. And it's just a reality. What do you do? Do you just say, well, the Bible calls us to love and, turn the other cheek and forgive 70 times 7, which means endlessly so? Or is there a place where you kind of jump in and you say, hey, we have to balance biblical teaching, right? So let's take that example.
Yeah.
If you're a parent that's listening to us and you have young children and you have a family member who has a bad night and at a big birthday party, crab feast, Christmas, anniversary party, fill in the blank, special event, and they maybe drink too much, they say some really despicable things, they create a real scene, a real upheaval. First time that happens, if your response to that person is never, ever come back in my house. Now, I understand that emotionally.
Sure.
But if you're thinking of things from a truly biblical perspective, you're probably thinking, okay, let's assess what happened.
Yeah.
Hopefully, let's do Matthew 18. Hey, Uncle so-and-so.
Yeah.
Do you realize what you did the other night? And if there's, what do you do when the person says, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have? Maybe it's not a perfect apology. I was having a bad day, etc. I think most of us, right, would probably say, well, you don't just bar the guy from your family.
Yeah.
What happens, though, and this is a question that I was asked by a woman weeks ago. Oh, it's happened every time. The occasions this behavior.
Yeah.
Well, Jesus already told us that, 70 times 7.
Yeah.
You could go that way.
Sure.
I think it gets tricky because it is admittedly subjective. When do you draw the line? And when I'm going to go out there, and I think you're with me on this, Nathan, although we've not really talked about it, to say, I think there does come a point where you do draw a boundary.
Yeah.
Now, that boundary is what? Boundaries typically are for what? Protection, provision.
Yep.
Right? So you've got a property boundary on your house, which means if you put up a fence because you have a dog or a pet, and you're going to keep it in the space, you're going to keep it safe, you're going to keep others safe.
Yeah.
You're going to grow crops out here. You're going to do this out here. You're going to make sure that your electrical wires aren't, sloppily hung where they could fall on the house of the person next door. There's a billion things related to boundaries, like physical boundaries. Relationally, that's just common sense. And I actually think the fact that we sleep is almost biological, divine proof of the fact that there are times where you have to be by yourself and not giving yourself to other people.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Or we sleep.
Right.
I mean, or we if we don't sleep and we die.
Right.
So I think we would all agree, it wouldn't be wise to let these melodramatic, horrible meltdown incidents happen ad infinitum, would it?
Yeah. And I think that's fair, right? I think when we look at things, we need to assess, we need to evaluate, we need to use wisdom, we need to use discretion onto what boundaries and what limits we are drawing, right? Joy and I, when we first got married, we kind of set out and said, hey, we're going to try to visit family members. We're not traveling on Christmas.
Right.
Christmas Day, that's our day. This is us together. We are a family together. We are going to celebrate together. Period. End of discussion.
Yeah.
And so
now let me ask you, dude, why? Why? I agree with you.
Yeah.
But the person says, but dude, you should be serving. You should be using your time to bless your family. So, what would you say?
Well, first of all, I would say, have you ever been a teacher?
Yeah.
But
Yes.
no, honestly, it was a lot of it had to do with for us personally. It just had to do. We didn't grow up doing that.
Yeah.
The several times that I did that with my extended family, it did not go well. There were clearly on my dad's side, there were clearly favorites, favorite grandchildren, and my family did not have the favorite grandchildren. And so, we as children, we loved our family. We were happy together. And so to kind of pick up, my dad's family was all in Michigan. So to pick up from New Hampshire, transport your whole Christmas there,
Yeah.
and then to basically be like, oh yeah, well, we kind of already opened the gifts from grandma and grandpa, and they got brand new skis and all of these other things. My parents were just like, we're not messing with that. So our reasons are not that. We just, because of that experience, we never traveled really growing up.
Yeah.
And Joy's family was the same thing. Like for her family, her dad, her parents were missionaries. They were constantly traveling all over all the time. Her dad, in particular, many different places overseas. And back then, not just for weeks at a time, but for months at a time, because you raise a certain amount of money, you need to get the most out of the money for the trip that you're on. And so Christmas was the time where we are going to be together as a family. We haven't seen Dad in a while. He's just getting back. We are going to spend this time together.
Yeah.
And so for Joy and I, it became a time where we said we want to establish our family traditions. I mean, I'm a big kid. I get presents on Christmas. I want to play with my toys.
Of course.
And so for us, it was just a matter of these are the things that we want to do on Christmas. We want to be able to attend our Christmas Eve service. If we were to try to, and we've done it before, that we have, quote unquote, broken our boundary on occasion to visit with her family and surprise them for Christmas.
Sure.
Visit my mom, surprise her on Christmas. And so we've done that, but Christmas Eve, that's time with our church family.
Right.
That's time where we are serving our church family.
Yep.
And as you know, Greg, Christmas Eve is a production.
Yeah.
And so having Christmas Day to just say, you know what? We just want to be together, the two of us. We want to put in the movies we want to watch. We want to eat the food that we want to eat, and just say, this is the day where we are celebrating together.
Yeah.
Was important to us.
Well, and I think, dude, what you're saying there is, again, I think we alluded to this in the first episode. Boundaries to me are stewardship.
Yeah.
They're, in that case, it might sound a little overly spiritual, but I mean it as sincerely as I can. What you enjoy are doing there is guarding and investing in your relationship, your marriage. And there are things that require that. Now, like you said, there might be occasions, but even the way you said that, dude, you decide we might break it. I know a lot of people, and I bet a lot of our listeners feel this way. Woo, we're skating on thin ice here, but I'll say it. There are, in every family, we all have guilt experiences.
Yeah.
Guilt. I bet if you asked a lot of people why they do what they do, it's not really out of stewardship. It's out of guilt.
Yeah.
Unrealistic expectations from other people.
Yeah.
That I feel like I have to meet. And often people feel they have to meet them because it's the quote unquote Christian thing to do.
Yeah.
Well, I need to do this. This is my family, and you do for family, etc. I think it sounds good, but at the end of the day, I think we're required as thinking adults that we have our little domains. We have our marriages, our family, our children, our work, our friends, our neighbors. You know, we've got so many little spheres of belonging that you do have to do some ordering.
Yeah.
Right? Now, so I tend to think exceptions are exceptions.
Yeah.
Right? So an exception takes place, and you decide we're going to do this.
Yep.
This thing is worth breaking our usual pattern for. But that's different. I think you are the ones exercising that sovereignty, to use a very fancy theological word.
Yeah.
Because we have a small s sovereignty where we have responsibility over our own spheres. And I think, dude, this is where we were talking before we recorded today. So I should get this in here now. Well, our boundaries, to your original question, biblical. I'll be the first to say you will not find a chapter and verse. Here's the chapter on boundaries in the Bible, and it says boundaries. I would also say you'll never find a verse about small groups.
Right.
The concept is all over the Bible. You'll never find the word Bible in the Bible, right? I'm just being...
Trinity.
Yes, the Trinity. You don't find the term, but you find the truth behind the term. You find the truth behind this. I think you find the truth of boundaries in the fact that one, like again, hardwired, biologically we sleep. You see even in Jesus' ministry at times where he does get away from the crowds. He takes his disciples. No, there's needy people here. We're not going to them right now.
Right.
It's time for something else. It's time for rest, etc. Jesus says, and I think this is interesting, let your yes be yes and your no be no, which is one of my favorite verses. It's clear, honest communication, right? So we were talking about this beforehand. Boy, when people use guilt in relationships, it's tempting to forget that verse.
Yeah.
I got to say this, dude. The question that I hate, unless it's in my most inner circle, when somebody says, you ever had this to you, Nathan, what are you doing next Thursday night?
Right.
I feel like, well, we haven't made a commitment.
Right.
But why do I feel like the way you're phrasing that means if I haven't made a commitment, I have to do your thing?
Right.
How about you tell me your thing?
Yeah.
Truthful, honest, open communication.
Yeah.
And let me decide.
Yeah.
Let me get back to you. See, it's kind of a form of entrapment. It's not always purposeful.
Yeah.
Sometimes, like I said, if you're super close, hey, dude, like, are you doing anything next Thursday night?
Yeah.
But a lot of times I've seen people use it where,
right.
In fact, you see there's an Office episode about this where Michael's trying to get Jim and Pam over to his house. So whenever Michael gives a date, Jim says, oh, we have plans.
Yeah.
Oh, we have plans. So Michael, do you remember this? He creates corporate's making us work till 8 o'clock tonight. And anyway, they're all working till 8. And then Michael gets on the phone. It's a hilarious scene where he's like, no, corporate, I will not let my people do this. And it's so funny. It's so obvious. And then he hangs up the phone and goes, oh, well, everybody can just go home. And he goes to Jim. Jim, do you want to come over for dinner tonight? And Jim is about to say he has no plans and realizes, crap, I was supposed to work. So the whole thing is it's just a classic setup of guilt, manipulation, etc.
Yeah.
That, to me, is where boundaries need to be drawn. Not in some self-centered way, but clear, honest, hey, this is my life.
Yeah.
I'm responsible for living it and investing time and energy into it, and just as you are.
Yeah.
So ask me and I'll let you know.
Right.
Ask me and I'll think about it. But the real issue happens, I think, a little more closely related to our conflict resolution issue here, are when there may be times, and that's the question I've been asking. Two people in our church have asked this in different ways. Are there times where you don't keep going back and getting walked on?
And I think the answer is, yes.
Yes.
I mean, there's
enough hinting at it. There are times you say you don't.
And again, I think it's situational, right?
Yep.
As an individual, if I have no one else to consider, let's say I'm not married, let's say I don't have children, but, I'm not married, I can determine if I can be around that drunk uncle.
Right.
as often as is needed, right?
It's the perfect example.
Like
drunk
that,
uncle.
Yeah, the
drunkle.
That's right, drunkle.
Yes.
I can determine if that's an issue or not, and I can say, you know what, I don't have a wife, I don't have children. This isn't something that's going to create conflict with the rest of my family.
Yeah.
It's me. And so for the sake of the gospel, I can continue to be a presence there. I can continue to put myself out there and say that I'm going to be the person who's going to just be here because I can be.
Yeah.
There isn't a boundary that I have to set that's going to pull me away from other responsibilities. This can be my responsibility. This can be my ministry, my form of gospel preaching to this uncle.
Yeah.
Let's start expanding that sphere out. So let's say that now I have, my wife, and now we've got drunk uncle.
Yeah.
Well, maybe I'm used to dealing with this and it's not an issue, but my wife is not. Mm-hmm. And her being in this situation and her being in this circumstance is going to put a strain on uncle's relationship and her relationship, but my relationship and her relationship as well.
Yeah.
Why don't we just leave? Why do we have to continue to do this? And I can't come to a resolution with my wife on us continuing to be here. She does not see this the same way that I do.
It's a great example.
Okay, my greater responsibility is to my wife in this case. Yeah. So boundaries have to now be set.
I think you nailed it, dude. The key to this, not that we always know, it's not that God speaks from heaven, but we do know there are times where biblical ideas are on the table at the same time.
Yeah.
I hate to say in competition, but from the standpoint of they're competing for our discernment might be the better way to put, what am I going to do here? What am I going to prioritize here? And I think in that case, that's a great example. I just heard a pastor recently, dude, you may have seen this or someone in our audience have, saw it going around social media maybe a couple of weeks ago. Pastor, I think it was of a fairly large church, was just sort of beginning his sermon. You don't see the guy calling out in the audience, but the little captions sort of tell you. I think somebody had brought a homeless person who probably had some mental health issues. And while the pastor is giving his introduction, the guy's calling out and he's using some pretty strong profanity. I mean, you hear it pretty clearly in the video.
Yeah.
And the pastor at first is like kind of laughing, all right. And then he asked the guy his name, and whatever the guy's name is, it's George. He says, George, can I ask you, and I actually thought he handled it, can I ask you to stop cussing? If you want some help, do you want somebody to talk to you today? Do you want one of our leaders? Are there any guys that would come up? We want to serve you. We want to help you. We want to talk to you and encourage you in any way we can. And then the guy must start crying about his life, etc. And I will say the pastor kind of comes to the front. He sits down on the stage and he kind of changes his sermon. And you hear him and he tells him, he goes, I want you to know. And he goes, if this had been you and me, I'd have let you cuss all day. It wouldn't bother me at all. He said, there are some children here. There's some younger people here in this big gathering. And he's basically telling them, I'm trying to balance.
Right.
So one of my favorite stories, dude, that Ron Powell, who, a lot of folks in our church are part of True Life Ministries, which is kind of a discipleship counseling basis. They do some really great work. And Ron, one of my favorite stories of Ron is he says, this guy that had come to faith in Christ, fairly new believer, is sharing about how thankful he is to be a Christian. He's only been a Christian like a week or two. Came out of a pretty heavy drugs and alcohol background. And he's getting emotional. And he says, I'm just so effing happy to have my sins forgiven. But he says it.
Right.
Yeah. Dude, I think you and I know. I love that.
Yeah.
I'm not put off by that at all.
Right.
He hasn't kind of learned a gathering vocabulary in what's available to him.
Yeah.
That word is what he needs to say about how intense his experience of having his sins forgiven means. you got, 4-year-old kids around. Oh, shoot. What are you going to do? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You're balancing things that come into play here. So I think that's when boundaries come into play. So you would ask yourself in that family gathering that I keep bringing up, because that's an email I actually got, years and years. So I said to this individual, I said, well, it sounds to me like you've done what Paul says in Romans 14, insofar as it depends on you.
Yeah.
You cut a person off, you don't even have a conversation with them. Jesus makes it pretty clear what we're supposed to do. You go, you have the conversation. I wouldn't do it when Drunkle is stoned. Right. I might wait till he's sobered up a little bit.
That's right. Yeah.
Hey, can I talk to you about what happened at Easter this year or so-and-so's birthday? Man, what was going on? And then you can kind of say, listen, we love you. We always want you here. We just can't have that happen.
Yeah.
Because if it was just me, I'd say, I know you're ticked off. Let me hear it, blah, blah, blah. And you could kind of roll with that. But when you got a group and it's going to affect so many people in the group, no.
Yeah.
So you're not being unbiblical.
Yeah.
You're not saying I don't forgive you. Now, if you do, well, that's an issue.
That's an issue, yeah.
But I do think there's a way that you can say, I might be in a state of conflict with that person, that they might say they're in a state of conflict, but it's conflict that includes the sincere attempt to get to a better place.
Well, and the boundary doesn't keep the person out forever, right?
Yeah.
The boundary is only there as long as it needs to be.
Yeah.
And, I think I can't remember if we talked about this in our other two podcasts or not, but it would be the same thing as if we were to hire somebody in the church to take care of the finances and they embezzle all the money.
Right.
Sure, we can forgive that person for what they've done, right? We can welcome them back and include them in the worship again and all of those things. No, they're not in charge of the finances again, right? Exactly, we've put up a boundary and have said, you are welcome to be here. We do forgive you for this, but no, you're not going to be now placed in charge of the finances. And that seems to be a pattern all throughout Scripture, that there is nothing that should ever keep a person out of fellowship unless that person wants to remain out of fellowship.
Agreed.
But whatever that person does, we can forgive you of this. But this area that you have trouble in, we're not putting you back in there so you can continue to have trouble there.
Well, dude, this I've got a real one on this. It sounds like such a cliche from my former church, but it's true.
Yeah.
We had a man who several of us knew from some context of conversation with him. One was a counseling context, so that's when things get very sensitive. But you knew that this man received and doled out abuse of children. So obviously it's a serious issue, burning issue. You also want to minister to that person. You want to embody the love of Jesus to that person. You want to help.
Yep.
And this guy was married now. His wife was fully in the know. They were there. He really wanted to work with kids. We told him no.
Yeah.
That was not the ministry that he was going to serve in. And dude, I'm just saying, sometimes, I'm not even trying to say this negatively, it was just a reality. They really had a hard time with us for saying that, because, I thought we preach a gospel of forgiveness and grace. We 100% do.
Yeah.
But we also balance biblical priorities.
Right.
You don't put a person with that history in that setup.
Yeah.
Because you also are protecting children.
Right.
You're also sending a strong message to prospective church members, parents that come with their children, that we are going to do everything in our power that your children are safe.
Yep.
We have a security team.
Yep.
The workers are criminally background checked.
Yep.
Of course, we're that's what we're going to do. And I remember at the time thinking, I'll be honest, dude, I thought, why couldn't this just be understood? And I really was hoping that the wife especially was understood. I think she saw the husband's pain. So I think in his mind it just compounded his problems and rejection, and we said, no,
Right.
this is just, I think your example would have been great, dude. Somebody that embezzles money from the
Right.
church, and they repent, and we've done all that we, dude, yeah, you're not going to be back in that position.
Yeah.
That's just not what we're going to do, where you've got this track record.
Yeah.
That's just, again, what? Stewardship.
Right.
It's stewardship of that person.
Right.
And his or her strengths and weaknesses. It's stewardship of other people, meaning the church
Yeah.
in that case. So, yeah, boundaries are not unbiblical.
Yeah.
If properly understood.
Yeah.
If they become just the cliche pop psych buzz, hey, I just need some boundaries. Like, I wouldn't recommend saying, guys, to your wives, just really need my 10 hours of football today. And my wife, she doesn't know how hard I work. She wanted me to help, around the house. And that's probably not going to make the most compelling case for biblical boundaries.
Right.
So yeah, isn't it funny, dude? Man, our weak, pathetic flesh will use anything,
Yeah.
right, it can find to justify it. So yeah, I would say maybe there's a better word, Nathan. I don't mind it because like I said, I've heard Henry Cloud use it, I think, pretty effectively. He has some really good tips to, this relates to boundaries. He asked the question, what do you do? Have you ever found yourself in this spot where you keep having the same conversation with a person again and again, and it just spins cycle? Yeah, but what about, no, because I already know, because, oh my goodness.
Yeah.
And every time, and you just spin out of it. He says the only way out of that spin cycle is you have to go higher. You have to almost elevate out of the orbit of that conversation and ask, hey, like if you and I were in that spot, Nathan,
Yeah.
we just kept going around the same issue.
Yeah.
Nathan, why do you think we keep having this conversation? Isn't that good?
Yeah.
Just as simple. You're immediately forced. No, I don't want to talk about the thing again.
Yeah.
But I want to talk about why we keep talking about the thing again.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, you've gone aerial.
Yeah.
And you're looking out. It's almost out of body. You're saying, why do these two guys keep doing this? And I think it's because that's kind of a form of a boundary, too.
Yeah.
This can't go on. This is insanity.
Yeah.
This is madness. You're not benefiting. I'm not benefiting.
Yeah.
So in a conflict, often it's the spin cycle.
Yeah.
You're just going around. And to be able to, can I ask a question? This is what should happen in a marriage.
Yeah.
Where they can't stop fighting. Why do we keep fighting?
Yeah.
And that necessarily won't solve every problem.
Sure.
But now you're talking about things on a different level.
Yeah.
And hopefully, by drawing that boundary, we need to stop doing this.
Yeah.
This is unhealthy for our children.
Yep.
It's unhealthy for each other. I assume you're not very joyful. I know I'm not very joyful.
Right.
I'm not spiritually flourishing right now by going back to this again and again. So for me, I've generally become a fan of the term, but I keep going back to it, how you started, because I do hate, remember we said in the last podcast, I think, I'm not the biggest fan of some of the counseling language.
Yeah.
I gave myself permission to so-and-so.
Yes. Yeah.
I know that's a popular thing. I'm not saying it's the worst thing. I don't know. Always
Yeah.
feels a little odd for me to say that.
Yeah.
Nathan, I gave myself permission to eat those 4 bags of Skittles. I don't know. It's just kind of a strange thing. So some of the pop psych stuff,
Yeah.
when we talked about, we've got to learn to forgive ourselves.
Right.
You press that too far, it's like, we can have a higher standard than God,
Yeah.
who forgives us. But boundaries understood as healthy, biblically common sense stewardship resources
Yeah.
of our time, sanity, other people, like you said, that we protect.
Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah.
I assume, dude, if I came into your classroom today,
Yeah.
and there were no kids there, and I was angry with you, and nobody heard, and I said, Nathan, I'm ticked. You'd probably say, sit down, Dutcher, let's talk.
Yeah.
Why so upset? If I did that when your students
Yeah.
are in the class, I'm going to know you, dude. You're going to have a different reaction.
Yeah.
Greg, I need you to leave.
Yeah.
And we can talk about this later.
Yeah. I'm going to see you at 4:30 today. Let's talk then.
And if I were to say, no, Jesus says do this quickly.
Right.
We've got to do it right now. Do it quickly. Yeah. You're going too far. So anyway, dude, this has helped me. I hope it's helpful to people listening.
Yeah, no, I think, I think this is good because it allows us to walk through these things and just see, okay, I think for most people, just understanding what does Scripture say on this becomes important.
Yeah.
Right? Because we all have our thoughts and ideas, but sometimes our thoughts and ideas aren't biblical.
Right.
You know, we talked about that, like with word choice and usage. Is it okay to say these things, you know? And I think, as you put it, yes, we can use the term boundary unless you want to come up with something that encapsulates what we're talking about. It's shorthand. We understand it. We know it. So, you know, okay, we're going to use that. But what are the boundaries that you're creating? Are they boundaries that are meant to protect?
Yeah.
They're meant to protect the individual. You know, I love the example that you gave about your former church, because it is about protecting the children, but it's also about protecting that person. Yeah. Right? Dude, you've been in a situation. This has not been good. It's not meant to penalize you. It's meant to protect you.
Absolutely.
It's meant to keep you safe so that you are, Scripture talks about having a name that is above reproach. Yep. Right? And so this is meant to keep your name above reproach.
So, well, I'm real quick, dude, I know we're kind of wrapping up here, but my friend Don, I keep telling former church stories, you know. What would pastors do without their former churches? What do they do when it's their first church? Right. Well, in seminary, I had a guy
3 years ago.
In college, in first grade, there was a guy that was sniffing the paste. I don't know. But
that was you, wasn't it?
Yeah, I know. I was eating the paste and sniffing it. There were a good friend, Don, who public testimony, was an alcoholic for 17 years. We were always mindful, dude. I don't, I have no issue with having beer, wine, in the house, and by the grace of God, my kids will grow up and I think say, I've not seen my parents hammer. They haven't, abused this or anything. I like to think they would say they saw a proper use rather than abuse of it. But when Don was over, we never had that stuff out. Yeah. Because I knew his story and I knew his testimony. So that's kind of a boundary. Yeah. It's a boundary he didn't even ask, but it's a boundary I put in place for his protection. Yeah. And for what kind of a friend would I be if, not that he would drink it, but I don't know, it just seemed to be insensitive. Yeah. A person is, coming out of detox or something and say, well, they should, I've got my freedom in Christ, I can do this. It's, so we can draw boundaries for the protection of others, for the protection of our families and friends. It's usually just a question to explore. Yeah. So for those families, people struggling, listening in, I do want to say discern guilt and pressure. That's usually the thing that gets people to, well, I want to do the right thing. I want to do the hard thing, even if it's the Lord. I always say that's where you have to go to a good creation mandate. Yeah. We're called to kind of take dominion, and each of us has that in some sphere. Yeah. Even a child has a little sphere for their dominion. It's their schoolwork, it's their possessions. They're supposed to do it. And then as we grow older, we take on more and more. And I would just say, if you're doing something out of external compulsion and not even allowing yourself to do the discernment and assessment, is this wise? Because no, I don't think again, to use Cloud, we're not responsible for of it. We're responsible to, which means we have to think, how can I best serve, best love, while balancing all of my other responsibilities? So I think it's more about asking the right questions. Yeah. No, that's great. Well, Greg, as you said, we are running low on time. Yes. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to sign off. And until the next time, we just rock the Casbah. Thank you again for listening to These Go to 11, an unchurchy conversation about everyday faith. Once again, please make sure you like, subscribe, and review on your favorite podcast platform.
And if you ever find yourself in the Forest Hill, Maryland area, please feel free to stop by at 135 Industry Lane. And you can get all of our service times and information at christfc.org.
These go to 11.